So far in our story, we haven't really touched too much on Doom 2099 and what the resistance against him is like. And it's very much alive, as we'll discuss in this upcoming section of the lore, which is long enough that I'll be calling it the 2099 saga, since that also helps us keep track of the two different timelines of Doom. So now, after explaining what's going on with the Web Warriors in 2099 and Venom in whatever time he is, let's start to go through the members of the 2099 resistance. So of course, being a natural part of this resistance, it's time to talk about Natasha Romanov, otherwise known as Black Widow. This version of her lives in 2099, but is actually from the modern day era, as she was given super soldier-like serums that vastly extended her life and kept her in great shape for over 100 years so far. This sadly means most of her friends are long gone. However, as the leader of the Red Room, she leads her forces against Doom alongside the resistance. In one of the more interesting lore entries in the game, Black Widow's Mercury Unsealed reads, "Taking Natasha Romanov by surprise was no easy task. She had been trained by a young age by her handlers in the Red Room to anticipate every eventuality. Of all of her many skills, it was the one she took the most pride in. Even when the world itself was on the brink of disaster, nothing ever caught her off guard. At least until today." When she first came to Tokyo, it was on a special mission for the Resistance. She was gathering intel that could help her fellow freedom fighters in their ongoing battle against Victor Von Doom, the tyrannical leader of Latveria, who had been spreading his iron grip across the world, one country at a time. But after that initial operation, she found herself feeling at home in this strange city, and really more at home than she'd felt in decades. Natasha might not have looked a day over 30 on the surface, but she had actually been in the spy game for more than 100 years now. Her prolonged youth and vitality were the side effects of an experimental life-extending serum given to her by the late great Nick Fury. Not quite the infinity formula, but still just as effective. She had never imagined she'd live to see the year 2099, let alone still be in the field. But here she was, standing on the rooftop of the Tokyo headquarters of Alchemex, ready to expose the company's greatest secret, whatever it was. Despite having a wide web of reliable contracts feeding her top secret intel, Natasha had no idea what she was about to discover. Alchemex, a major multinational pharmaceutical corporation with far too much power, had more secrets than she could count. Most of them fall under various levels of clearance though, labeled from lead all the way up to gold. But until today, she had never even heard of an asset with Mercury classification. But here, somewhere within this building, there was something flagged of that rare and mysterious clearance level, and whatever it was, Natasha knew it couldn't be good. Fortunately, getting inside would be easy. Maybe not for the average citizen or even one of the many web warriors that always seem to be swinging through the cities these days, but for someone as seasoned as the Black Widow, a few Alchemex security officers would be no threat at all. As she entered the building, she instantly encountered a pair of guards. With 2 quick bursts of her Widow's bite, they were out for the count, and Natasha had access to the building's freight elevator. According to her intel, the Mercury level asset was being stored in a vault in the building's sub-basements, and since this is one of the tallest buildings in Tokyo, Natasha knew she had a long way down. She couldn't risk simply hopping in the elevator car and pressing a button, however. The building security systems would instantly identify her and shut down the lift, making her a prisoner. So instead, Natasha pried open the elevator doors with her hands, peering into the empty shaft. And it was at that moment where she knew she was going to have to do this the hard way, but thought to herself, no, this is the fun way. Securing her zipline to a steel beam above her, Natasha begins to lower herself down the shaft, dangling precariously over what seemed to be a bottomless pit. Cautiously, she accelerated her descent, dropping several floors a second until something suddenly caught her eye, a tiny red dot glowing on the wall. She clutched her hand tightly on the brake to bring her fall to a sudden stop, and then reaching into a pouch on her belt, Natasha pulled out a small bag of white powder. She opened up the bag and dipped her fingers into the chalky substance, raising some towards her lips, and with a gentle puff as if blowing a kiss, Natasha sent a white cloud of powder gently billowing into the elevator shaft, revealing a latticework of crisscross laser beams just below her that would have otherwise been invisible to the eye. "Yes, this is my stop," pulling herself over to an elevator door and prying it open from the inside. She was only halfway down the tower, but she would have to go the rest of the way on foot. Luckily, it was the middle of the night and all of Alchemex's employees had already gone home for the day, so there were no regular civilians in danger. Entering a stairwell, she continued her descent towards the building's lowest levels as stealthily as possible. Occasionally, she crossed paths with a security guard on patrol, but managed to take them out with ease. Natasha was skilled in countless non-lethal ways of neutralizing targets, but she had one in particular she put to good use that night, a Krakoan neurotoxin given to her by Wolverine that easily incapacitated any foe that she scratched with one of her razor-sharp fingernails. Natasha didn't take any pleasure in dispatching the guards because they signed up for this job knowing exactly who they were working for. And so finally, after what seemed like hours, Natasha found herself at a thick metal door 5 levels below the building's lobby. The door had a high-tech keypad next to it, limiting access to only those with the proper code, which was changed daily. So Natasha prayed that her intel was up to date as she pulled a wire from her gauntlet on her wrist and attached it to a port on the keypad. The keypad turned green and the words "access granted" appeared in Japanese, followed by the sound of a large metal lock releasing. Natasha cautiously pushed the heavy metal door open and entered the chamber on the other side. As she exhaled, she could see her breath hanging in the air in front of her. The temperature in this chamber was far lower than it had been in the rest of the building. So Natasha immediately went to a computer and tried to access the files stored on it. As she tried to hack into a heavily encrypted folder named Project Rising Eagle, she realized something. These systems weren't using Alchemex security codes. They were the same type of encryption protocols used by the public eye, the police force that kept all of Tokyo under its thumb. What's going on here? As she scanned through the secret files, there were notes about some sort of super soldier serum from over 100 years ago, more recent studies in the long-term medical benefits of Krakoan flowers, and some scans of ancient chemical equations and nonsense phrases like greater science, secret alchemy, and quiet math. But most jarring, even some surveillance photos of Nick Fury and Natasha herself. Before Natasha could dig deeper, a strange noise caught her attention. A beeping. Slow and steady, like a heartbeat. The sound led Natasha to the center of the room, where she saw a large tube with an enormous crystal shard inside. Wait. No, that's not crystal. It was ice. And inside of the ice was a strange shadow, in what looked like the shape of a human figure. Instantly, Natasha realized that this must be the Mercury asset she had been searching for. But what or who was inside? And why were they so important? She needed to find out, and this might be her only chance. So accessing the terminal, she initiated the thawing sequence and the ice began to melt rapidly, creating a pool of water that drained through the bottom of the tube, as well as a cloud of mist that fogged up the glass and obscured Natasha's view. As the sequence completed, there was a moment of eerie silence, and Natasha cautiously reached towards the glass window of the chamber, but pulled back suddenly as another hand, clad in a red glove, pressed against the surface from the inside. It stayed there for a second, pushing against the glass, before the figure it belonged to slumped to the floor inside of the tube. Natasha wasn't sure what she was about to unleash, but there was no turning back now. She hit the button to release the tube's glass door and waited for the billowing steam to clear, and once it finally did, what Natasha saw inside left her in a total state of disbelief. There in front of her was a man, down on one knee, clad in an antiquated red, white, and blue jumpsuit. She knew his image well. She had seen it over and over again during her days in the Red Room as a symbol of everything that Mother Russia stood against during the Cold War. This was Captain America. But he had died during World War II, hadn't he? Suddenly, the brightly colored man began to rise to his feet. The Red Skull. Where is he? Dead, Natasha replied. For about 50 years now, soldier. What? Cap said, trying to gain his bearings. How? This isn't the war anymore, Natasha said. Captain America glazed around the high-tech machinery in awe and confusion. Last he remembered, he was on board a doomed plane over the Arctic Ocean. Where are we? Not really sure if you wanted to know the answer. You might want to ask, when are we? The answer is Tokyo 2099. Tokyo? We're behind enemy lines? It's not like that anymore, Natasha said. These days it's not about borders. It's about freedom. It always has been, Cap said. Fair enough. And now you have yours. Thanks to you, Cap replied, knowing that without his new friend's aid, he would still be suspended in a deep freeze. That won't last long if we don't get you out of here. Leading Cap towards the door of the chamber. Alchemex was keeping you on ice for a reason. We don't want to be here when they realize you've been thawed out. Too late. As at that moment, a battalion of heavily armed guards burst their way through the chamber doors. Public Eye, Natasha said, recognizing the guards' uniforms. Never heard of them, Cap responded as he blocked the guard's electrified nightstick over his forearm. But I can't say they don't remind me of someone. They're no Hydra, Natasha said, kicking away one of the Public Eye's enforcers, but they're just as good as making sure the citizens under their protection are living in constant fear. Let me guess, Cap said with his fist flying. They think they're the good guys. They always do. Some things never change, Cap mused, wishing that he had his trusty shield with him as he knocked back another guard. We need to get out of here, Natasha said, fighting her way through the chamber door. We don't stand a chance against this many of them in such a tight space. Lead the way, said Cap, covering Natasha's back as they made their escape into the stairwell. Captain America and the Black Widow worked their way up the 5 flights of stairs back to the lobby of the Alchemex building, taking out a constant flow of Public Eye soldiers along the way. The two fought in perfect unison, almost as if they had been partners for years. And though she usually preferred to work alone on missions, for once, Natasha was glad to have a new ally on her side. As they reached the lobby, leaving a trail of unconscious guards in their wake, they were met by one of the Public Eye's giant mechs, a heavily armed robotic drone used to police the streets of Tokyo and keep dissidents in line. Go, Cap said to Natasha. I've got this. No, we can't risk you falling back into their hands. Cap leapt towards the drone, narrowly dodging a blow from its oversized mechanical fist. He reached up and grabbed a hold of a circular plate of metallic armor on the robot's shoulder, ripping it off with ease. I'll be fine, Cap said with a smile, holding the disc of armor like a shield. I used to be able to do this all day. Time to find out if that's still true. As Natasha reluctantly raced towards the lobby's main exit, Cap hurled the armored plate at the drone's torso, slicing right through its core circuitry. The mech began to spark wildly, and suddenly its single eye turned a bright red.
Self-destruct protocol initiated,
the drone said in a synthesized voice. Well, that's new, Cap said under his breath, realizing the critical mistake he had just made. Natasha turned back and rushed to help Cap, but it was too late. The drone erupted in an enormous burst of flame that filled the lobby. Cap leapt on top of Natasha, protecting her from the burst, but the shockwave from the explosion still hit them both hard. Natasha's vision went blurry as she hit the ground, and moments passed before she regained her consciousness. She looked around for the man who had just rescued her from a fiery fate, but he was nowhere to be found. Where had he gone? The answer would have to wait. Sirens were blaring nearby, and the Public Eye was about to bring in backup, so Natasha needed to get as far away as possible. So the Black Widow managed to disappear into the night as she had done so many times before, and her mission had been partially successful, but she wouldn't be able to rest until she knew what had happened to Captain America. As for the first time in ages, Natasha had been caught by surprise, not only by the legendary hero in the block of ice, but by the unusual feeling he had inspired within her, something she hadn't felt in decades: hope.